Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We're going to be sharing tonight some stories about toxic stress and how it's impacted us, as well as some things that are going to be helpful for healing, overcoming toxic stress. And so I would just like to quickly begin by introducing myself. My name is David. And I am going to be just sharing a brief introduction to a thing called the window of tolerance related to toxic stress. All of us have what we call a window of normal tolerance. We all experience stress as a part of our normal day-to-day living. And in our lives, our survival mechanisms, we've created windows of tolerance about how we handle the normal day-to-day stressors. And so toxic stress, however, can either go outside or above our window of tolerance, where we really feel it in our bodies because cortisol is being poured out and the stress hormone is being released and we feel anxious or we feel afraid or we feel angry or whatever it may happen to be and a lot of other things that are in addition to that. But we can also go below our window of tolerance into sadness or depression or listlessness, those kinds of things. So we can go above or below our normal window of tolerance as a part of life that's lived in response to stress or trauma. So I'd like us to begin with sharing some of our journey and stories. And so I'd like Beverly, if you would begin, please, I'd really appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Beverly, and I'd like to share an experience I had that really, I think, speaks to this idea of this window of tolerance, my ability to navigate and work through experiences in life. When I was in graduate school getting my doctorate in nursing practice, I had we had a change of leadership. And as a result of the change of leadership, there was a decision made that they would not honor the program of study that every class has. And as I talked to the chair of the department, and she explained how the program of study was changed, and my comment was, "That's not going to work for me." And that became my mantra. That's not going to work for me. And every day as I was going through this program, I would just be so upset, so frustrated. And I'd come home and I'd be just on edge. And David would talk me off the ledge and say, "Listen, just put your head down and just do what they ask you to do." And I'd say, "Yes, you're right." And I did that for several months, and it was very, very stressful. I found myself being angry, frustrated, really struggling. But I realized that I needed to see this through, and I was able to file several grievances and won all of them. And each one there was a sigh of relief, and I knew I was able to accomplish my goal. But the window of tolerance, man, I would be like being able to manage, and then there would be days where I would be outside my window of tolerance, and so praise God, I made it through. And but that was just a very, very tough time for me.
Wanda, I'm wondering if you might share a bit.
So many client stories and patient stories came to mind, but one in particular, um, it's very interesting because the relationship, it's a marriage, and the marriage itself presented unwell is how I will label it, right? I have several roles in my life, but one is being a dialysis social worker. And so I help families, spouses, couples just adapt to the new life and responsibility of doing dialysis. And within the relationship, there was already a hierarchy, I would say, and my patient felt as if her diagnosis of dialysis was hovering, that the spouse was using it against her. And if I go back to a window of tolerance, it was when she needed him. She felt like, hey, I cannot rely on him anymore. I need to learn how to do my dialysis on my own. You know, we had to have a discussion of, do you really want to learn how to do this dialysis on your own? And her answer, it just kept being, yes, I have to, because I cannot allow him to control me in the way that he has for all of these years, but now medically. I saw the toxic traits within that relationship almost disappear once she learned, hey, I can do this on my own. Like, it's nice to have you here, but I really am capable. And sometimes people just need to know that they can, and they need someone to show them that they can. But you also, they have to get to the point of, hey, I'm outside of my window. I can't do this anymore. So,
Michael, how about you now?
Um, as a first responder, toxic stress takes on a whole nother level. You know, first responders in general have such a high rate of divorce. But then you look through someone's 25-year career and they are seeing things that, as my mother would say, that nobody is supposed to see. That is what we are seeing on a, not daily basis, but we see it often enough. So me as a first responder, if I don't have to be involved in something, I don't get involved in it. Back when I was younger, yeah, you want to see all the blood and gore and all of those kind of things because it's the cool thing to see, right? But then you don't realize how traumatic it is for you until you are losing sleep. And then you talked about the cortisol levels was something that we all deal with chronically in the first responder areas. And so you don't realize those things. So then now what I have done is I've limited and I preach very heavily to the guys that work underneath me is to limit the exposure that you have to the things that you don't necessarily need to see. Yes, it might be cool to see something, but at the same time, at what cost does that come? So, doing a better job of trying to limit your exposure, and then also trying to control the stresses that you can, and having a spouse that's on board with what you do, and they're able to be a support system for you is very, very important to ensure that you have the best life as a first responder, but then at the same time, as what Wander was just alluding to, is that having someone that is a support system for you goes a long way in helping to reduce that level of stress that you do feel.
You're bringing up a very important point, and that is, as a first responder, there's this phenomena called secondary trauma, where you weren't the one in the car accident, or you're not the one whose house burned down, but you experienced that, as you go on the scene, that secondary trauma or stress becomes yours that you have to deal with as well. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. Dr. Kathy, would you go next, please?
Sure. I am very familiar with toxic stress, not only in my patients, but as well as in my life. And one of the things I wanted to highlight with toxic stress is sometimes you may not even realize that you're stressed. And so you don't seek help or do anything about it. And so my toxic stress, and they talk about healthy levels of stress as well, but knowing when that's gone past, many times we do not know. And that's another reason why we don't seek help. So in medical school, I started getting these random spots on my body. and the dermatologist couldn't really figure out what it was. And it would usually happen before exams. And I felt that was my body's way of internalizing the issues and coping with it. And I just preface that because I ended up having a bigger health problem later on in life. I was trying to conceive. And I was working a job where I worked 12 hours straight. It was very stressful. In the initial years, I used to cry a lot at the job because if I went on vacation and I was returning from vacation, I would just cry knowing I was going back to work. However, I was there for 5 years, and during that time, I got married and then trying to conceive and couldn't conceive. It was a very difficult and trying time, and had to seek medical intervention via IVF because they couldn't find any explanation for why it wouldn't happen. And so eventually, when I did get pregnant, wasn't able to carry the baby past 20 weeks, was placed on bed rest. I was able after 5 weeks on bed rest, couldn't hold the baby in anymore. So he was born at 27 weeks, spent 72 days in the NICU. And while I was there in the hospital, because I developed complications and whatnot, I got a call from a recruiter asking me, "Why do you like your job?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Why are you there?" And I couldn't give an explanation. I don't know why. I never thought to look or move on, or that was like a wake-up call. I went and found another job. And doing that job, I found it to be a whole lot less stressful. I moved to Alabama, took a job that was part-time, and lo and behold, automatically just got pregnant. Wasn't, really trying or seeking. But, when I was talking to, my colleagues, and we all know the effect that stress has, like you were talking about with hormones, cortisol levels, females and men as well, females and their cycle, and how that directly impacts so many different aspects of their health. And so I knew about all of this, yet I didn't take the steps to do anything about it to course correct. And so I just wanted to highlight how, necessary this roundtable discussion is, and if it can create awareness for people to maybe take an inventory about what's going on in their life and are they really managing it. I learned from medical school that I don't manifest my stress outwardly. I'll keep on chugging, but your body keeps score. I think more knowledge about the subject, definitely more awareness needs to be spread.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Sherelle, what would you like to share?
So I have a story that I'll share, and similar to Dr. Kathy, my husband and I went through our fertility journey, our journey to try to conceive. And on that journey, with the medical visits and going through treatment and just all the things, that was already stressful enough. But when it came to toxic stress, what made it toxic was the chronic uncertainty, the emotional roller coaster, like going from highs and lows. Like one week we could get great news, we were pregnant, and then the next week we find out that we're, dealing with a miscarriage. And just that repeated cycle of grief was, for me, like what made that whole situation toxic. And then in addition to that, I also became this advocate or like this voice for women of color in the fertility community because, us sharing our journey on social media, online, my initial goal was to help people who essentially look like me, because I remember at the start of our journey, like just kind of searching for other couples who are going through it. We really didn't see, at least online, people of color. So I started sharing my journey and then somehow became an advocate for other women, for other couples who were dealing with fertility issues and going through the IVF treatment and dealing with miscarriage. So also now, like dealing with my own issues or my own challenges with it, now I'm having to kind of take on and support other women who are going through that. So that can, for me, I think that also kind of led to the toxic stress of it, having to try to support myself while also trying to support other people and being that voice, if you will. Like I said, the fertility journey itself can be stressful, but when you add all of these other components, that is what leads to the toxicity of it. And I just remember, like I said, going through that for like 4 5 years nonstop. Like we would literally experience pregnancy loss, go through the high of hearing a heartbeat and getting this good news, and then losing the baby, to losing twins, and then getting right back into it. So that was just that cycle that I feel like we just needed a break from to take, to take the time for us to really like just heal from that. So, that was my experience with toxic stress. And I know a lot of women who deal with the fertility journey and go through that, they experience that toxic stress as well. So
Well, thank you so much, Sherelle, and thank you to everyone who's been a part of this, and not only your stories and journeys, but the things that you have done to heal. The things you've suggested are very, very appropriate, and so we're so glad that we can share these with those who will watch this. So thank you all.